بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
Assalamu alaikum. It is Wednesday, 18th of January 2023, and in our series Reflections on the Holy Quran, this is broadcast number 386. These days we're looking at the words of Al-Baqarah, which is chapter 2, verse 106, and this is the 11th broadcast about the words of this verse of the Holy Quran. These broadcasts are brought to you by LASER, Lahore Ahmadiyya School of Education in Religion, which is a department of the Ahmadiyya Association for the Propagation of Islam. The Ahmadiyya movement was created by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, who taught us that although others say that after the Holy Prophet Muhammad, prophets can come, but the Holy Quran says the Holy Prophet was Khatamun Nabiyyin, and the Holy Prophet said that means La Nabiyya Badi, or there is no prophet after me. So now no prophet can come, old or new. And Hazrat Sahib said that his claim was that he was one of the Mujaddideen, just like in previous centuries Mujaddids had appeared. He was in that chain. But his distinction was that the Holy Prophet in Hadith mentioned two personalities, Messiah and Mahdi, and these were not two separate personalities, but the characteristics of the work of a Mujaddid. And he taught that Muslims start calling each other kafirs and heretics and so on slightest disagreement. And he pointed out that the Holy Prophet Muhammad has warned against such practices and said that if one reciter of the kalima says to another reciter of the kalima that you're a heretic, then this edict returns and falls upon the person who uses it. Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad also taught that other Muslims believe that the foremost source of knowledge about religion is the hadith. But he said this is incorrect. The foremost source of our knowledge about religion and Allah and so on is the Holy Quran. Next comes the Sunnat, or the practice of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. And then come ahadith, or sayings of the Holy Prophet, which were recorded many years, the earliest one being 100 years after he had passed away. Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad also taught that although other people say that some prophetic revelation has been missed out, and some verses of the Holy Quran, some say up to 512 verses, have been abrogated. He said this is totally wrong. Nothing is missing from the Holy Quran, and no verse of the Holy Quran was, or is, or shall be abrogated. And he said that jihad, as defined by the Holy Prophet Muhammad, is a fundamental duty of every Muslim. The Holy Prophet, Sallam, when returning from fighting, said that Muslims are returning from the minor jihad to the major jihad, and explained that major jihad is a struggle to control your inner self, your own desires that tempt you to do the wrong thing. So let us turn to Al-Baqarah, verse 106. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ما ننسخ من آية أو ننسها نأتي بخير منها أو مثلها ألم تعلم إن الله على كل شيء قدير. And Hazrat Maulana Muhammad Ali has translated this as, find his English translation. Whatever message we abrogate or cause to be forgotten, we bring one better than it or one like it. Know you not that Allah is possessor of power over all things? So today we look at the last word of this verse, Qadirun. So let me go to my notes. This verse, its root is Qaf, Dal, Ra. And we've 11 words based on this root are found in the Holy Quran, and a total number of 132 times. 45 times as Qadir, and 25 times as Qadara, and 16 times as Qaddara, and 14 times as Qadir, and 11 times as Qadr, and then less than that. And they mean to restrict, to control, to have power, to determine, to plot. It also refers to resources, what means someone has, or a measure, what measure someone something according to a measure. And the whole Quran is full of the fact that God created everything according to a measure, and so on. So let me look at my notes from my dictionaries, which don't want to appear for some reason. Right. They had started misbehaving, but that my notes had been, the file had frozen. But anyway, al-qadratu, this is qudrat, power, ability. So when we use this, and the subject is a human being, you're talking about a human, then that means the power, the ability which a human being can use to do something. The prime minister has the power to declare war. So that is something he can do. But when we talk about God's power, that means that God is not dependent on anyone or anything else. If you take the example that I gave just now, that the prime minister has the power to declare war, but he can't do it without getting permission from the parliament. The parliament has to approve the fact that he wants to declare war. So the prime minister has to put his case, and you could say he has to humble himself before the parliament and explain and get their approval. But when we talk about God doing something, he doesn't need any support. He doesn't need any approval. He can just do whatever it is that he wants to do. So this is complete power, perfect power, on which there is no restriction. So Al-Qadiru is the being who, depending on what he wants to do, depending upon his wisdom, can do whatever he wants to. And it will be done exactly. Nothing less, nothing more. And the only being which has this power is Allah. So we say, وَهُوَ عَلَى جَمْعِهِمْ إِذَا يَشَاءُ قَدِيرٌ. This is in the Holy Quran, in chapter 42, verse 29, that he has the power to gather them. And similarly, we have the word muqtadir, as the Holy Quran says, in the Malikim Muqtadir, chapter 54, verse 55. In the court of the king, which has all the power. So obviously, it's only God who has all the power. Um, Obviously, a king may have power, but he doesn't have power over his life. He doesn't know how long he's going to live. He doesn't have power over whether he's going to be ill or healthy. Now, human beings also use this, but this is in an imperfect sense, in a partial sense. For example, if someone says, I don't know, that these days we have the Australian Open, and if a player had problems with their first service and they've been practicing a lot, and they can now say, well, I now have power to make a first service which cannot be returned. But that power remains, is limited to that thing. It doesn't include everything else. It doesn't include bowling in cricket or batting in cricket or hockey or whatever. And of course, people say that God granted them that power because eventually everything leads back to Allah. And this is called taqdeer. And there are two aspects of this. And that is, as I've just explained, that God can give his creation power to do certain things. And in that, the creation's own ability and practice and all that is involved as well. And taqdeer ilahi, God's power, also means that when he sets out to create things, then he has a measure according to which he's going to make those things. And there are two aspects of this. First is that God creates something and it's not going to change. So long as the universe remains, then you will have stars and planets and moons and whatever else. And nothing will change. Until the day of judgment, there'll be no change in them. And we know, for example, that if the sun, they say one day the sun will run out of fuel, that explodes and sends out the light and the heat, which allows life on Earth to develop and live. When the sun runs out of that fuel, it will go dark. There'll be no light, there'll be no heat, and it's going to be bitterly cold. And if you think these days when it's -4 outside, it's cold, it's going to be -4,000. You can imagine your gas and electricity bills at the end of the month if the temperature outside was -4,000. And the other aspect of this is to create something and give it some power, and it changes. but in a limited sphere. Like, for example, trees. In autumn, they shed the leaves and so on and so forth. In summer, with heat and light, or in spring, they start growing leaves, flowers start flowering, etc. But the thing to remember is, although this change is taking place and it's going to and fro, a rose plant will only bear roses. It will not bear some other flower, let alone a fruit. So although the change is there, whereas in sun and moon and planets and so on, there is no change. They are created and that's how they will remain. But the change is limited to what the law or the measure that God has created. And the Holy Quran says in chapter 65, verse 3, قَدْ جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدْرًا. And God has set up a measure for everything. And then فَقَدَرْنَا فَنِعْمَ الْقَادِرُونَ. Chapter 77, verse 23. And then we set things to a measure. And we are the best, superlative, in setting up measures for different things. Now, in this, there is also a warning for us. Because in setting up these measures, God has also set up a measure of, for example, how long we will live. And people generally start to blame God when someone close to them, dear to them, dies. But God says, I created a measure for this person's life. And I'm the best at it. So to complain and to cry and to lament and say, oh God, why did you do this to me? Is actually to be ungrateful to God. Yes, there is a human element. The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, at an old age, he had a son who was very dear to him. And the son died. And as he was being buried, tears came into the Holy Prophet's eyes. And people were astonished. And they said, "O Prophet of Allah, you're crying, there are tears in your eyes?" And the Holy Prophet ﷺ said, "Yes, my eyes cry, but my heart is content. I'm not challenging Allah's measure about how long He had determined that my son shall live. But then I'm a human being. I have a natural affinity, love for my child. And that is why tears came into my eyes." So, if God is the one who's created this measure, then to try and lament and blame Him is disrespectful and ungrateful. God says, قَدْ جَعَلَ اللَّهُ لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدْرًا, chapter 65, verse 3. And for everything we have created a measure. Everything we have created a measure. When something will be, or someone will be born, how long they will live, etc. And in fact, in another place it says, نَحْنُ قَدَّرْنَا بَيْنَكُمُ الْمَوْتِ. قَدَّرْنَا. And we established, we put a day when you're going to expire. And a day when we're going to cause you to die. In fact, this also answers an objection, because one old religion, its followers say that God causes people and things to be born, and Satan is responsible for their death. But this rebuts that, because it says, we, nahnu, we, God is the one who created the measure according to which you will die. And of course, we have inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr, that we, in the night of majesty, in the night of power, we started the revelation of this Holy Quran, this guidance for mankind. And of course, it's called a blessed night, and it is a blessed night, because the last message of Allah for humanity started to be revealed on that night. Now, but some people take it to extremes, and they say, well, Laylatul Qadr is a special night, and on that night God doesn't do anything, but he opens up all the ledgers for the coming year and determines who's going to get what, and who's going to die, and who's going to live, and who's going to earn how much money, and whatever. And this is why people say, well, that night, all night, you must pray, and you must lament, and you must ask for things, and this and that, etc. So the night of power, it's God's power to send guidance to humanity, by following which we can attain to God. We can create a link with him. I don't think it means a night on which God sits down with his ledgers and says X will earn £20,000 and Y will earn £40,000 and Z will starve to death, and so on. And about everything God says, Inna kulla shay'in khalaqnahu biqadr. And everything you have created according to a measure. And then specifically about light and dark, it says, Wallahu yuqaddiru al-layla wan-nahara alima allan tahfu. Chapter 73, verse 20. And God has created the night and the day according to a measure. Because, you see, this refers to the fact that we should be using the night and the day and the things that cause night and day. Because God has created them according to a set measure, a rule, a law. And God makes it our duty to find out those laws and rules, and then to use them for our benefit. And this is why some 50, 60 years ago, I said we should not look for the moon for Ramadan with our own eyes and the moon for Eid and so on, because the days when we needed to do that have gone. Now, in accordance with this verse, if you have studied the measure according to which these things operate and work and so on, then you can find out when Ramadan is going to start and when it's going to finish and everything else. Similarly, God says, Min nutfatin khalaqahu faqaddara. And God created him from sperm according to a measure. According to a measure. So God does everything. I mean, God creates everything from sperm, but then human sperm can only create humans. That is the limitation God's law has placed on them. And animal sperm, I mean, a horse cannot produce a bull, and a bull cannot produce an elephant. So the measure is limited within God's law, that this will create this thing, that will create something else. And this is a very important point to remember, that everything is created according to the genetic structure it is supposed to have. And that is its measure. And you cannot go outside that. And people, they have all sorts of fanciful ideas and things which they say, if this happens and that happens and so on. But no, this is not what God has said. God has clearly stated that even when something has power, that power is limited within a certain area. In human beings, you have blood cells. They make blood. They don't make bone. They don't make skin. They only make blood. They're all cells in your kidneys and your liver and etc., etc. Brain cells we talk about. But if someone is suffering from dementia or something like that, you cannot take some blood or some cells from his heart or his arms or whatever and put them in his brain and that will get rid of dementia. It doesn't work that way. Because although those cells have power, kidney cells have power within the kidneys, brain cells power within the brain, heart cells have power within the heart, and so it goes on. I see we've slightly got over the time, so I will stop at this point with the prayer that whoever you are, wherever you may be, may Allah keep the whole of humanity free from harm and safe and sound. Our next broadcast will be our Friday prayers, and then after that, next Monday, we'll again return to reflections on the Holy Quran. Assalamu alaikum, Khuda Hafiz, and goodbye.